Why did it have to happen in Seattle? What happened? Because Russ, again, that's the type of guy, homegrown, Walter Payton Man of the Year, go Hawks. I mean, and I would never have imagined as he's going through that ascension from, Pete Carroll, Seattle Seahawk, face of franchise to, he's gone before he's 34. So what happened?
I think it goes back to the last contract negotiation. And I think you can actually take it back to, do you remember the stories out there that and this is the year that Baker Mayfield and Josh Allen and Sam Darnold were in the draft. In 2018, that the Seahawks had explored trading Russell Wilson to Cleveland, and with the idea that they were going to, wind up with the number 1 overall pick and take one of the quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, like from what I've heard, that stuck with him, and that was part of the reason why the next year he had a no-trade clause negotiated into his contract, so he could control where he was going to go next. And I think all the way around, there was a feeling after that negotiation, because it was a difficult one, this is going to be the last contract he does in Seattle. Like, this is going to be the last one, and we'll figure it out somewhere along the line, but let's try to make the most of it now, and then that's going to be that. And, I think because of some of the animosity that it built up over the years, you saw some of the back and forth last year. And this year was a little bit different in that, and I think Russell felt like this was going to be it for him. And he was content to say, let's just let this play out. And, I think over the last, I'd say, month or so, talks started to heat up. I think they've been talking to Denver since the beginning of February. And, it's just kind of built and built and built. And I think for the Seahawks, the main thing was you look at the roster, it's like, okay, if we know we've got no more than 2 years left with Russell Wilson, because there's 2 years left on his deal, do we think we can get the roster back into a place where we can win fast enough that it's going to be worth it to keep him around, knowing that we're not going to give him another contract? And I think you just look at that, then you juxtapose it against the trade value, which if you've got a guy with 2 years left on his contract, he's more valuable than a guy with 1 year left on his contract and what you can get for him. And so I think for Seattle, it was everything that had built up over the years was just, it was all right. Now is the time. Now is when it makes sense. The same way Detroit traded Stafford last year with 2 years left on his deal. And then I think Russell really wanted to go to a place where everything was built around him, and it was going to be a very quarterback-centric operation, because he never really had that in Seattle. And, Denver historically has done that. Go back to the years of John Elway, obviously with Peyton Manning. I think they're able to afford him sort of what he was looking for in that way. And in a lot of ways, Rich, what's really interesting about this is I think, the root of some of this was, Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson last year looking over at Tampa and looking at what Tom Brady had there and said, give me that. And I think Aaron Rodgers has sort of been able to leverage his way into having that without having to leave Green Bay. And now I think Russell Wilson's got it in Denver.
Yeah, I was kind of likening it to Roethlisberger and Cowher having a different dynamic than Tomlin and Roethlisberger. That, that to Pete, Russ was always that kid who he drafted, or at least in Russ's mind, he was always, the kid that Pete drafted and nurtured, always compete, and he competed and he got in. And now Russ is going to be the OG that everybody went to go get for the new coach. What a totally different quarterback coaching dynamic for him. And it'll be fascinating to play out and see if it works, right?
Yeah, the context of it is important, and I think you nailed it. It's, all the history there, the Legion of Boom, right? And how there was friction between Russell and those guys, and Russell's place in the organization, and how Russell thought things should be run versus how Pete thought things should be run. And I think those guys are going to look back on their years together fondly. Don't get me wrong here. I don't think this is a hatred thing, but your history is your history, and I think that history sort of weighed everyone down over the last couple of years. And so now the Seahawks get to go and rebuild the roster, and they got draft capital to do it. And Russell comes out of this, and again, his entry point to Denver is so different than his entry point to Seattle. And, he arrives there sort of as the man. And, I think he arrives in sort of a partnership with George Payton and with Nathaniel Hackett. And those guys are still relatively new there too. And, he can, again, be the guy who can help bring along a Jerry Jeudy, who can help maybe take Cortland Sutton to another level, who can maybe get more out of KJ Hamler, all of that. And he can attract other guys in from the outside. And so, I just think, like you said, the context of the relationship between team and player is much different in this case, which I think is exactly what Russell was looking for.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.